So I love the series. Had a great time from minute one, like trying to piece it all together. And I talked to Emma on Tuesday, and I was saying it's kind of burns the candles at both ends in the middle. Like there's all these different threads that are you're piecing together, and you're trying to see where it all connects, and then you add so much more depth and complexity as to the themes that you take on. So it's really just a unique watch for me, which I love that, especially after all the hours of TV, to find something that feels fresh.
That is such a nice thing to hear from you because I know you take in a lot. So it, yeah, I mean, I think our goal always when making something is can we make something that feels familiar in some ways and then really unfamiliar in other ways. And I think in making a murder at the end of the world, a sort of whodunit, murder mystery, a part of making it unfamiliar was just taking, you know, the person that is normally in the story, the victim, the age and the gender of the victim of the murder, the woman that dies at the end
Mhm.
of, 10-minute opener teaser, and instead make that person the detective. And I think we found in doing that, and doing it not in a tongue-in-cheek way, but in a credible way, that you really believe this young person in her 20s is going toe to toe with some of these figures and managing to hold her own. I think doing that turned out to be a pretty serious inversion of the genre, and hopefully makes it for some surprising viewing or shows you something you haven't seen before.
Yeah, I mean, it's whenever it's a good mystery, I mean, you're already hooked. So this one threw me off, and I was like, I was trying to piece it together, and you have suspects, and then there's the trails you follow, and then you're like, oh wait, no, that one doesn't work out, and oh wait, no, that's not the suspect because or the murderer because he's dead now. So uh, you know, that's always a lot of fun, and but then you get into some other inject some like with the technology and AI, which I'll get into in a moment. Um, Other aspects of that aren't typically in these types of stories. It's usually
Mm.
a police officer or detectives, and you move on. But going back before this series, I just wanted to just touch upon your kind of leap from like the academic path and like a yeah you had a career path, and then you decided to take a lot of chances and go into entertainment because of your passion. Like what gives you that, you know, those guts, I guess, like how does that come about?
You know, it's so interesting that you asked that because I've been thinking about that a lot lately. And um, I think honestly it was that I kind of lived my backup plan first. And in many ways, like once you live your backup plan and it doesn't work for you, you're you're suddenly just like, okay, I gotta walk this tightrope and there's no safety net and I just have to go. And whatever befalls me, if I fall off, is just what's gonna happen. And I would rather kind of live a life a little dangerously and than than not. And I think that's really part of what made me feel like there was no alternative. Um, I had studied economics in school, so I went to work at a bank over my summer and my junior summer, and I found that experience, unlike economics, which is, in and of itself, math proofs are like writing scripts. They can be
Mhm.
beautiful, they can be poetic and clean, and simplest number of variables to get the right answer. And there's a lot of beauty and creativity in math, but in its real world application, it was a lot more just like number crunching in a cubicle, and there was something for me that felt I just couldn't find myself in it or find joy in it. And after I had done that, I was just like, okay, I'm ready to just throw my life down on the line, and whatever it's going to be, even if it doesn't work, at least I will have tried, for something that I thought would make me feel um, a little more joyful every day. So yeah, I came out here and I worked a lot of odd jobs in the beginning as a cinematographer and on different sets and stuff, and just trying to make money whatever way I could. And then I would spend my nights reading screenplays and watching films and trying to figure out how I could maybe make one or be in one. And it took a good like 7 years to figure that out. And then um, yeah, then we got a little lucky when a couple of films that I'd made with a sort of cohort of friends got into Sundance. And
So is there no formal training, or is it just like, all
yeah,
self-taught
no,
essentially?
yeah, embarrassingly
Wow.
so. I feel like if
No, embarrassing.
I
That's
wish I
amazing.
had gone to school for it, because I think I would probably I have to learn from my mistakes and learn from my mistakes publicly, in real time as I'm trying things out. Um, but I do also, I think that there is something I think refreshing about being self-taught, in that you you learn what the rules are, but I think you're more willing to break them because they haven't been handed to you by an institution of authority. So, you read the screenwriting books and you watch films, and you know what the, conventions are, the tried and true things, but you sort of feel like it's all more malleable because you're just literally making it up as you go.
I mean,
Oh,
that's incredible. It makes it even more impressive just, to know that because, a lot of people go through the system and they come out and they know how to make what they're going to make. It's kind of like the cook, I don't know why, but I always go to food metaphors, but it's like the person who can go to a kitchen and just open the fridge and open the spice and go, okay, I have something, and then you hope it comes out, and they know it's going to come out, and if it does, then like success, and everybody wins. But there's no like recipe to follow. There's no set format, which is amazing.
I think the cooking analogy is so good. I use it all the time too. I think it is so much like filmmaking. And I only know this because I learned to cook in the pandemic. I didn't know how to cook. I like grew up having like bowls of cereal for dinner, and then like I carried that on into my adult life. And then the pandemic kind of in an intense way put a lot of work on pause for everybody, and I had to learn to cook at home. So I finally figured it out. And I think it is so much like filmmaking because you have a recipe, which is like a script, and you have your cast of characters, which is like all the things you've procured from this market or that market. But then you still have to deal with the spontaneity of the moment and your own mood, and like,
Hmm.
are you frustrated? Are you exasperated? And so you burn the eggplant, or are you like, relaxed, calm, focus? And so everything just comes in the right time and it all flows together, and like people eat the meal and they can taste the love that you put in it. I think it is exactly what filmmaking is.
Well, like you said, you made mistakes that you put out into the world, and you learn from those. But that is cooking too. Like
Yeah.
eggs are never easy. So I can do so many things, but for some reason, when my wife or daughters ask me to make eggs in the morning, I'm like, it's a 50-50. I don't know why, but I just can't. I've never like read how to make eggs. I just make them, and sometimes they come out like that kind of burnt, smelly, terrible
Wait,
egg
are
smell.
you scrambling? Are you doing over easy or fried egg? What's
Uh,
going on here, Steven?
pretty much all of the above. The scrambling is I overcook the outside, and they stink. And the scrambled, I mean, I'm sorry, the sunny side up, it gets stuck to the pan. So everything's great until I try to lift it up, and then the yolk
It
rips
comes
all
apart.
over. Like,
Yeah.
yes, but every once in a while I nail it.
Yeah.
So
But that's what
I
filmmaking
prefer
is
to go
really
the
like.
omelet route.
Yeah, I feel that filmmaking is like that. It's like you show up to set every day and you all have the same piece of script, and you all know what you're there to do. And sometimes something magical slips in, and sometimes even though everyone's there with the best intentions and the weather's right, you just don't quite capture what you thought could have come out of that scene. And it's, not anyone's fault in particular. It's just like cooking.
That's fantastic. So I was wondering too about shows or films that influenced or inspired you, because not having the film school route where you're kind of fed, your Citizen Kanes and all, all the list. Is there just something that like that triggered the need to tell stories that, over the years, a TV show or a film?
I think when I was a kid, I remember this vaguely, but I went back home recently and my parents were like unpacking their, storage garage, and they were like, okay, all these boxes are yours, do with them what you will. And I started going through them and I found these stories I'd written as a kid, and like I could not have been more than like, I don't know, seven, like, and I clearly or maybe six or so, I clearly dictated to them to somebody who typed them, and then I like hand illustrated them, and then my parents were always going to Kinko's on the weekend. I don't know what that was about, but I was always with them going to Kinko's, and I would laminate them and like bind them and, you know, take them very seriously, these stories. I mean, and some of them were ridiculous. One of them was about like a woman who kidnaps children by spraying them with a can of hairspray, and then they shrink down to a small size. And because they're small, she puts them in her pocketbook and like gets away with it. And the story was about a young girl who was a detective who had to figure out what was happening to these kids. And I mean, who knows where all this was coming from when I was only like 7, but I think that was always there. And then I think, you go through school, you grow up, there's a lot of different voices around you. You are told you should pursue something more practical, and I went that whole route. I really tried to be a practical girl, and it didn't work out for me. So now I'm living a very impractical life, telling stories. And I think the thing that I found in college while I was studying economics is I started watching independent or like art films for the first time. I didn't have that exposure growing up. Um, and I saw, Kieslowski's movies, Red or The Double Life of
Hmm.
Veronique. And I was like, oh, I didn't know you could do this, and I think I'd always liked the written word, but there was something about filmmaking that was taking the written word and marrying it with poetry and the poetry of moving images and juxtaposition and feelings or moods that you could create that are very hard to create just on the page. And um, I became really obsessed with that. So now I think I'm stuck here just wrestling around with it until I die, trying to figure out how to more nearly communicate what it is that I think I feel I mean.
And we're all better for it.
No,
So
I don't
that's a
know.
good
I
thing.
don't know about that, but it's nice of you to say.
So to get into a murder at the end of the world, the story, as I'm sure you know, is very current. I mean, the AI aspect of it. You're almost like a soothsayer, and like I'm wondering, like, how did you anticipate, you know, I, even a year ago, the conversations we're having now would seem like science fiction, but you had written this, produced and all and everything else, and all the way through post production, and um, it seems like you're must have been years ahead of that conversation. So like, where did it come from? Where did you pull those ideas?
It's interesting that you say that because nobody really brings that up, but it's true that when Zal and I were first talking about this, the bare bone that we had is this idea of an amateur sleuth and it being a young woman and her being invited by a technology billionaire, to a mysterious retreat somewhere. And we'd had friends who'd been invited on these kinds of retreats by, technology billionaires. And so we knew pieces of what that was like, and we were very intrigued by the idea of doing a whodunit in that setting. Um, but then a lot of the stuff that we like were leaning into initially, people who were in that space were like, oh, don't do that. When we said we wanted to make him an AI designer, people were like, ah, that's so far away, and people in the space, were like, that's
Mhm.
so far away. Maybe you want to have them be focused on space or, you know, some other thing. Um, and we really persisted on the AI thing because the more we were reading about it, the more we were like, this is terrifying and interesting
Oh
and,
yeah.
and also mind blowing. Like there's something about AI that is connected to awe. I think a lot of us, like I felt that the first time, we played with an early version of Chat GPT-3 before it went public. And in the earliest version, we input a scene and it sort of spat something out, and it was mostly funny because it didn't understand. But by the time I was playing with the later versions of it, it was not funny anymore. It was like you felt like you were having an encounter with an alien intelligence that had been given some of the basic parameters of human like discourse and was like giving you an alien narrative. And
Mhm.
um, that is exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. So I think we felt that coming and we're interested in writing about it. And then we did a lot of work back then in the screenwriting to explain what AI was to people because we would turn the scripts in and people would be like, I don't know what this is. Explain it to me. So we would like write a scene where we're like, here's how a large language model functions. And here's that, you know, it's not a genie in a bottle. It's a statistical model that's, you know, ingesting a lot of information and giving you the most probable next word, you know, much like a autocomplete. And then by the time
Hmm.
we were like editing it and putting it out in the world, people were like, cut that scene. You know, we know what this is now. So that was all a little uncanny because it felt like, and then the we were so delayed from COVID and so delayed from the strikes that we ended up coming out after ChatGPT. But I wonder what it would have been like if we had come out before, because obviously it had been we'd been cooking, to go back to our cooking metaphor, for a long time on it.
Yeah. Where do you stand on it, like on AI in general? Because I mean, as you said, there's some things that you say, oh, this could be used for good and we can really benefit from this. But I mean, there's a reason you have a billionaire as you know, kind of your villain, I guess you'd call him, you know, because we just don't trust them. We don't trust the people who have the money and the power. Um, and you hope they do good, but I mean, over and over again, like as we've learned through trickle down, you know, non-trickle down economics and everything else, you know, when there's a chance, an opportunity to be greedy or to take care of yourself first, that tends to be where we go. But then on top of that, you have, and I don't want to give too much away in case people haven't seen it, but there are elements here of, you know, where it kind of gets into the like war games or um, the fifth element, like you're talking about absorbing all this information. I don't know if you know the fifth element, um, but she's like an alien. I think I can't remember exactly who she is, but she kind of plugs into the internet or something and absorbs all of humanity and doesn't
Yeah,
understand it and has a tough time processing it. So there's not
yeah,
really a true right or wrong. So I'm
yeah,
like, just,
yeah.
you know, curious what your some thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's so I feel something I think pretty similar to you, which is that I if Octavia Butler, I don't know if you've read any of Octavia Butler's work. She's an amazing science fiction writer. She wrote this incredible story called Parable of the Sower and many other marvelous things. But, you know, if Octavia Butler or Ursula Le Guin were building our AI, you know, building it together, I'd be pretty psyched on what that would be. Like, I think it would be probably unfathomably awesome. I think what scares me about the system we're in is that everything is being built inside a system that can only really measure and value profit and can only really be interested in profit quarter to quarter. So it's the short-term thinking and it's the obsession with just the monetary gain that
Mhm.
I think as a result, it's almost feels impossible for us to create something that isn't a little dangerous and like limited, you know, in its conceit, you know, like and so I think that's what Zal and I were thinking a lot about as we were writing A Murder at the End of the World. It's just the question of like how Andy Ronson as a singular person sort of designing this thing, how his own fears and anxieties, which, you know, if we come from a non-judgmental place, like everybody's got fear, everyone's got anxiety, everybody's worried about their family, everybody wants to protect, you know, their children. But what happens when you're in a place of sort of unusual power and resources to design the things towards those fears and anxieties? And then what happens when that's just like unleashed on the rest of the world and we're all playing catch up? I mean, I think about this a lot with social media. You know, there was just a piece that was published recently that you know, a lot of people have been talking about, you know, mental unwellness, you know, in the generation that came of age with the smartphone and with social
Mhm.
media as their kind of like primary social engagement. And I think we can all say pretty unequivocally at this point, many of us could have said it a long time ago that that isn't feeling good to people, you know, but we're the guinea pigs, you know, all this stuff is being tried out on us in real time. And all of it is about an attention economy, which is a profit economy. It's not asking itself, well, what does that do to how a 13-year-old girl feels about herself when she's scrolling through images of her and her classmates that are, you know, in a bikini on a beach are getting a lot of likes and she
Mhm.
feels shame about her. Like what we're never asking those kinds of things as we're designing it. And I feel like that's where we're I worry about what's next, you
Yeah.
know, but I'm
Okay.
also
I was going to
excited.
ask,
Yeah.
are we doomed? And I think you kind of answered it, but
Well, maybe
I,
not in the sense that at
I
least people are pushing back. I mean, look, I think the strikes were the writers' strike was,
mhm.
and the actors joining the writers and the Teamsters and everybody. I think I'm not sure the federal government is going to solve any of these things, and so I think it is on us, the people, the workers, to be like, okay, you know, we're going to draw the boundaries of the boundaries around how much we're willing to, you know, have our imaginations and our labor and our resources, you know, sucked out and turned into gold somewhere else for someone else. Yeah.
Yeah, I have so many bullet points I could discuss, and you've got so many very insightful and really interesting takes. But I do want to talk a little bit more about because we're running out of time. So let's get into Darby a little bit. You did
Yeah.
kind of touch upon some of your goals and when the character originated. I'm just wondering, you know, if you can just talk about that a little bit more. But also, I was curious. One direct question: Darby and Bill, any in any way autobiographical?
Oh my God, that's so. You're really shrewdly getting to the heart of everything. Who did you talk to before this?
I didn't.
Um,
I just I talked to Emma. That was it. She
oh,
enlightened
it's
me.
interesting. Yeah, I think that there are definitely some aspects of uh, there are definitely some aspects of myself, I think, that I put into Darby. Um, I think one of the things that I figured out along the way in my life is that I often used work and a kind of obsessiveness about work as a way of keeping everything else at an arm's length, especially like intimacy with other people. And um, I think Darby has that arc in the story. And talking about your broader question, like, you know, what does it mean to take the detective that is traditionally played by a man, an older man, and sometimes maybe swapped out for an older woman, but with a gun and with a badge, you know, acting with all the authority of the male gun and the badge. What do you mean? What happens if you strip those things away and it's just a young woman? She doesn't have a gun, she doesn't have a badge. She's authorizing herself to do all of this. What kind of journey does she have to go on to solve something? And I think Zal and I talked about this a lot, that we felt that that's not a linear journey. That has to have some sort of arc. She has to have some realizations about herself that are required to solve the greater mysteries of life. And I think part of what she figures out in the love story with Bill is that, you know, she thinks that he broke her heart and that he left her in a cruel way. And then as she goes back and revisits all those moments, I think she comes to understand that she had actually left him many times emotionally before he physically left her, and that she struggles to meet people in in that kind of like vulnerability of just like, you know, being in a room with somebody and like holding their feelings with them. It's a lot easier to instead go to set and like write a part and act that part in the safety of narrative than it is to live, you know, real life is messy
Mhm.
and complicated. And so yeah, I do think it's funny that you bring that up because um Malcolm Gladwell is an old friend of mine, and he was watching the series and he texted me as he was watching, and he was like, you know, there's a lot of you that you put into Darby. And I thought, oh, I hope nobody else figures that out. But now I guess
I
now,
talked to him too, as you know, we're
yeah,
old
yeah,
friends.
I'm sure you probably did.
Oh no, I have his books. That's about it.
Yeah.
So one more question about those characters. You know, they're both kind of lost, and they find each other. Do you ever think about where they would be if they didn't find each other?
Oh, wow. That is such an interesting question. Yeah, you know, I thought a lot about the first time I fell in love with somebody when I was writing the scenes between Bill and Darby. And I thought that one of the things that's kind of uncanny about first love is that it's also like the first time a mirror is held up for you so you can see yourself. Like often the person you fall in love with first is someone who helps you see who you are. Because at that age, you're still just trying to figure it out. And so you're
Mhm.
looking for qualities that mirror you back to you in another person. Um, and I think that Darby and Bill have that. I mean, they have it even down to like their haircuts even ended up being kind of similar, you know, and they have a almost sibling like kind of quality when they're around each other. It's a twinship, you know. And I do think that Bill helps Darby figure a lot of herself out, and vice versa. I think they're two. To talk about the wonderful things of technology, you can grow up as an outcast working in your dad's morgue in the middle of nowhere, Iowa, and there's no one like you, and you go to your math class and you smell like formaldehyde and kids don't talk to you. And then you can meet one kid on the internet, another state away, who shares a similar passion for solving puzzles, and you feel caught and met and permission to be your weird ass self. And I definitely know something about that from the first time I fell in love. And I would hate to think what it would be like if you took that, if I hadn't met that person. I don't know quite who I would be. I'd be somebody different, I guess.
I mean, I'd have to watch it again, and maybe you're thinking this way, but you brought the kind of the mirror, and I'm like thinking too. I was saying, and burning a candle at both ends, and it burning at the middle, and it's working its way in. It is this kind of whole reflective. At the beginning, you have them, and this is what I talked about with Emma, and she brought it up, saying she didn't quite understand why she was saying the names, or didn't like. She said it, but she didn't totally grasp it. And then by the end, it was such a different emotional reaction to saying the names of those victims and why she was saying those, and what it meant to her. And I'm like kind of seeing this whole mirror, like there's a pane of glass in the middle where, maybe not completely symmetrical, but there's this kind of reflective alternate, I don't
Wow,
know.
no, that's amazing. And speaking of mirrors, now you've just mirrored it back to me, because that's not something Emma has told me before. I mean, we talk a lot about a lot of different things, but not that particular story. And it's so moving to hear that. And I see how that is true. I think we all went on a journey together where by the end of it, we all understood as a cast, as a crew, as a group of storytellers, what it meant to say the names of those women, that it is a insistence that those lives mattered, that those names mattered, that their stories, didn't just disappear into the night, and
Mhm.
and their families aren't left like in a kind of endless ellipsis of and there's something very beautiful about Darby in the end rescuing helping Lee get out, because in many ways her life has been about traveling in the wake of killers who have ended women's lives, and finally in the end she meets a woman who she can help before she meets that fate, and she gets her and her son out. And there's something very beautiful about that. I felt when Emma performed many of the scenes at the end how much Emma had come to embody that mission of Darby's, of insisting that the people whose lives fall between the cracks, um, that those lives matter, that every life counts and should be recognized. And yeah, it's really beautiful to hear that story from you.
I enjoy hearing more about it, and kind of like just going back to food, digesting it, and giving me something to chew on and think about it. Because I know I want to watch it again. I really do. I'm like, just to take it all in, and get a different, a knowing view of it, and be able to watch it and without the mystery cap on, but just more of like watching the humanity and what unfolds and how people change and grow. I do have to
That's
wrap
cool.
up,
Yeah.
so
Well,
we'll
this
ask
is, oh yeah,
I'm
go
sorry,
ahead.
what was that?
I was just going to say, I hope that the second viewing stands up. I think that it will. At least that's our great hope when we make these things, is that they get deeper with every viewing rather than like the inverse.
So this will be a quick one. Will we see more of Darby?
I guess that's up to so many things that are out of my control. But yes, I mean, there certainly could be. We wrote this story with like a clear beginning, middle, and end. We wanted it to be like a novel, like a delicious novel on your bedside that you couldn't put down. But that said, Darby certainly has a lot of growing up still to do. So I can imagine a scenario in which, we could find her somewhere else in the world, puzzling out something else, murder at the other end of the world, maybe.
Well, I believe Emma said that they would be ready to take it on. So,
Mm,
you know, that's two checks. Maybe, I don't know how many more boxes you have to check off, but let's make it work. So
I
thank you
hope
so much.
so.
I really, really enjoyed this conversation. I could, have it on for, could continue for another couple of hours at least, but I do have to make dinner.
Yeah,
Speaking of
I
food.
hope it's not eggs, or if it is eggs, I hope they
No,
come out right.
thank you. Thank you so much. I will
Thanks.
make that happen. Have a great day.
You too. Bye, Stephen.
All right, bye now.